Officer Daniel Martinez had been patrolling the downtown district for 8 years, but nothing could have prepared him for what he would discover on that cold Tuesday evening in March. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, creating puddles that reflected the dim streetlights like broken mirrors scattered across the asphalt. His canine partner, a German shepherd named Rex, sat alertly in the passenger seat of their patrol car, occasionally lifting his head to sniff the air that rushed through the slightly cracked window. The radio crackled with routine calls throughout the evening. A domestic disturbance on 5th Street had been resolved. A minor fender bender near the shopping center required traffic direction. It seemed like another ordinary night in their small city of Millbrook, population 32,000. Daniel had grown comfortable with the predictable rhythm of his patrol route, winding through residential neighborhoods where porch lights created warm circles of safety, past the old cemetery where ancient oak trees stood like silent sentinels, and into the commercial district where most businesses had long since closed for the day. As they turned onto Maple Street, Rex suddenly became agitated. The dog's ears perked up and he began whining softly, pressing his nose against the window. Daniel knew his partner well enough to recognize when something was wrong. Rex had an uncanny ability to sense things that human perception often missed. The dog had helped locate missing children, detected drugs hidden in vehicles, and even alerted Daniel to a gas leak that could have caused a massive explosion. Daniel slowed the patrol car and rolled down the windows further, allowing Rex to get a better sense of whatever had caught his attention. The street appeared empty except for a few parked cars and the occasional cat darting between garbage cans. Most of the storefronts were dark, their security lights casting long shadows that danced whenever the wind stirred the bare branches of the trees lining the sidewalk. Rex's agitation intensified as they approached the narrow alley between Morrison's hardware store and Chen's family restaurant. The dog began barking urgently, pawing at the door handle as if trying to open it himself. Daniel had learned to trust his partner's instincts completely. In their years of working together, Rex had never been wrong when he sensed something important. Pulling the car to the curb, Daniel grabbed his flashlight and opened the door, allowing Rex to jump out ahead of him. The dog immediately ran toward the alley, his nose to the ground as he followed a scent trail that was invisible to human senses. Daniel followed closely behind, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his radio, ready to call for backup if needed. The alley was darker than the street, illuminated only by a single security light mounted high on the back wall of the hardware store. Puddles of rainwater had collected in the uneven pavement, and the air smelled of wet concrete mixed with the lingering aroma of cooking oil from the restaurant's ventilation system. Daniel swept his flashlight beam across the narrow space, checking behind dumpsters and examining the shadows cast by fire escapes and utility boxes. Rex had stopped about halfway down the alley, circling around something that Daniel couldn't see clearly from his position. The dog's behavior had changed from urgent alertness to something that seemed almost protective. He was whimpering softly now, occasionally looking back at Daniel as if asking for help. As Daniel approached, his flashlight beam revealed what had captured Rex's attention. There, lying partially hidden behind a large green dumpster, was the motionless form of a young woman. She appeared to be in her early 20s with long brown hair that was now matted and wet from the rain. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and she was lying on her side in a position that suggested she had either fallen or been placed there. Daniel's training kicked in immediately. He quickly checked the area to ensure there was no immediate danger, then knelt beside the young woman while keeping his flashlight pointed away from her face. Rex positioned himself nearby as if standing guard over the unconscious girl. Daniel could see that she was breathing, though her breaths were shallow and irregular. Pressing the button on his radio, Daniel called for emergency medical assistance and backup units to respond to his location. His voice was calm and professional as he provided the dispatcher with details about what he had found. But inside, his mind was racing with questions. Who was this young woman? How long had she been lying here? What had happened to her? While waiting for the ambulance to arrive, Daniel carefully checked for obvious injuries without moving the girl unnecessarily. She appeared to have a head injury, and there were bruises visible on her arms and face. Her pulse was weak but steady. Most concerning was her level of consciousness. She was completely unresponsive to his voice or gentle touches on her shoulder. Rex remained close throughout Daniel's initial assessment, his intelligent brown eyes moving between the unconscious girl and his human partner. The dog seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, maintaining his protective stance while staying out of the way of Daniel's work. The sound of approaching sirens broke the stillness of the night as paramedics and additional police units responded to Daniel's call. As the alley filled with emergency personnel and equipment, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this discovery would be different from the routine calls that usually filled his shifts. Something about the girl's condition and the circumstances of finding her suggested that this was just the beginning of what would become an extraordinary story. The emergency room at Millbrook General Hospital buzzed with controlled urgency as the paramedics wheeled the unconscious young woman through the automatic doors. Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending physician on duty, immediately took charge of the case. Her experienced eyes quickly assessed the patient's condition as nurses efficiently transferred her from the ambulance gurney to a hospital bed in Trauma Bay 3. The girl remained completely unresponsive despite the medical team's efforts to rouse her. Her vital signs were stable but concerning. Blood pressure was slightly elevated, heart rate was irregular, and most troubling was her Glasgow Coma Scale score, which indicated a moderate to severe brain injury. Dr. Chen ordered immediate CT, scans, and blood work while the nursing staff carefully cleaned and cataloged the patient's injuries. Officer Martinez had followed the ambulance to the hospital, leaving Rex in the care of his partner who had arrived at the scene. Daniel felt a personal responsibility for the girl's welfare, though he couldn't explain why this case affected him more than others. Perhaps it was the way Rex had seemed to connect with her, or maybe it was simply the vulnerability of finding someone so young and helpless in such dire circumstances. The hospital social worker, Mrs. Patricia Williams, arrived within an hour to begin the difficult process of trying to identify the mystery patient. The girl carried no identification, no wallet, no cell phone, and no jewelry that might provide clues to her identity. Her clothes were generic brands that could have been purchased at any department store. Even more puzzling was the complete absence of any missing person reports that matched her description. Dr. Chen emerged from the trauma bay after 2 hours of examinations and tests. The CT scan revealed swelling in the brain, consistent with a significant head trauma, but no skull fractures or bleeding that would require immediate surgical intervention. The blood work showed no evidence of alcohol or common street drugs, though toxicology tests for other substances would take several days to complete. Mrs. Williams had contacted the local police department's missing persons unit, but their initial search through recent reports yielded no matches. The girl appeared to be approximately 22 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, with brown hair and brown eyes. She had no visible tattoos or distinguishing marks except for a small scar on her left hand that appeared to be from an old injury. The mystery deepened when hospital staff discovered that the girl's fingertips showed signs of having been deliberately damaged, making fingerprint identification nearly impossible. This discovery suggested that someone had gone to great lengths to hide her identity, raising serious questions about whether she might be a victim of human trafficking or other criminal activity. Detective Lisa Rodriguez was assigned to investigate the case. A 15-year veteran of the police force with extensive experience in cases involving vulnerable populations, she approached the investigation with both professional skepticism and genuine concern for the victim's welfare. Her first step was to review security camera footage from businesses near the alley where the girl had been found. The footage revealed little useful information. The cameras from Morrison's hardware store showed the alley entrance, but had limited range due to the angle of installation. Chen's family restaurant had a camera that covered their back door, but trees and shadows obscured much of the alley itself. What the cameras did show was that no vehicles had entered or left the alley during the hours immediately before Officer Martinez's discovery. This evidence suggested that the girl had either been brought to the alley on foot or had been there for longer than initially estimated. Detective Rodriguez expanded her investigation to include canvas interviews with residents and business owners in the surrounding area. Most people reported seeing nothing unusual, but Mr. Chen, the restaurant owner, mentioned that his delivery driver had noticed a strange smell in the alley earlier that week, but hadn't investigated further. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the medical team faced their own challenges. The girl showed no signs of regaining consciousness despite their efforts. Dr. Chen consulted with neurological specialists who recommended continued monitoring while they waited for the brain swelling to reduce. The patient was moved to the intensive care unit where she could receive round-the-clock medical attention. Officer Martinez visited the hospital every day during his off-duty hours. He told himself it was part of his professional responsibility to follow up on the case, but truthfully, he felt a personal connection to the girl's situation. Rex seemed unusually affected by the discovery as well, becoming restless during their regular patrols, and often leading Daniel back toward the alley where they had found her. On the third day after the discovery, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Williams was sitting beside the girl's bed, reading aloud from a local newspaper as part of the hospital's protocol for coma patients, when she noticed the girl's eyes moving beneath her closed lids. The movement was subtle but consistent, suggesting that some level of brain activity was returning. Dr. Chen was immediately notified and rushed to examine the patient. The neurological tests showed improvement in several key areas, though the girl remained unconscious. Her brain scans indicated that the swelling was beginning to reduce, which was an encouraging sign for potential recovery. The news of the girl's improving condition spread quickly through the hospital staff, many of whom had taken a personal interest in her case. Nurses began spending extra time in her room, talking to her and playing soft music, believing that familiar sounds might help stimulate her return to consciousness. Detective Rodriguez continued her investigation with renewed urgency, hoping to solve the mystery of the girl's identity before she woke up. The detective had a feeling that when the girl regained consciousness, she might be in danger from whoever had harmed her. The evidence of deliberately damaged fingerprints suggested that powerful people might be involved, people who wouldn't hesitate to harm her again if they discovered she had survived. On the 7th day after her discovery, the young woman's eyes fluttered open for the first time. Nurse Jennifer Walsh was checking her vital signs when she noticed the subtle movement. The girl's gaze was unfocused and confused, darting around the unfamiliar hospital room with obvious fear and disorientation. When Jennifer spoke softly to her, asking how she felt, the girl's mouth moved but no sound emerged. Dr. Chen arrived within minutes of being paged. Her examination revealed that while the patient was conscious, she appeared to be suffering from severe amnesia. The girl couldn't remember her name, where she was from, or how she had ended up in the hospital. More concerning was her obvious terror whenever anyone approached her bed. She would press herself against the far side of the bed and watch every movement. With the wariness of someone who had experienced significant trauma, Mrs. Williams spent hours trying to communicate with the girl, using gentle questions and reassuring gestures. Through patient effort, they established that the girl understood English and could respond to simple yes or no questions by nodding or shaking her head. However, any attempt to ask about her past or her identity caused her to become agitated and withdraw even further. Officer Martinez was notified of the girl's awakening and requested permission to visit her. Dr. Chen was initially hesitant, concerned that the presence of a police officer might further traumatize the patient. However, Mrs. Williams suggested that bringing Rex along might provide a calming influence, as therapy animals had shown remarkable success in similar cases. When Daniel and Rex entered the hospital room, something extraordinary happened. The girl, who had been fearful and withdrawn with everyone else, immediately fixated on the German Shepherd. Her entire demeanor changed as Rex approached her bed slowly and carefully, as if sensing her fragility. For the first time since awakening, the girl reached out voluntarily, extending her hand toward the dog. Rex gently placed his head near her hand, allowing her to stroke his fur. The transformation was immediate and remarkable. The tension in her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing became more regular, and for the first time she made eye contact with another living being. Daniel watched in amazement as his police dog, trained for law enforcement duties, seemed to instinctively understand exactly what this traumatized young woman needed. Dr. Chen observed the interaction with professional interest. She had seen therapy animals work with patients before, but Rex's connection with this particular girl seemed unusually strong. The dog remained perfectly still while she petted him, occasionally lifting his head to look directly into her eyes with an expression that seemed almost human in its compassion. Detective Rodriguez arrived at the hospital that afternoon, hoping to interview the conscious patient. However, it quickly became apparent that traditional questioning would be impossible. The girl became agitated whenever anyone asked direct questions about her past, and her amnesia appeared to be genuine rather than feigned. The detective shifted her approach, focusing instead on building trust and creating a safe environment where memories might naturally return. The breakthrough came when Rex was visiting for the third time. The girl was petting the dog while Daniel sat quietly in a chair nearby, when she suddenly spoke her first word since awakening. "Dog," she said softly, her voice hoarse from days of disuse. The simple word brought tears to Mrs. Williams' eyes, as it represented the first real communication they had achieved. Over the following days, the girl's vocabulary slowly expanded. Though she still couldn't remember anything about her personal history, she began to trust the small group of people who cared for her daily. Dr. Chen, Mrs. Williams, Daniel, and several nurses formed a protective circle around her, understanding that her recovery would require patience and security. Rex became an unofficial therapy dog for the girl, visiting every day during Daniel's off-duty hours. The hospital administration, recognizing the therapeutic value of these visits, granted special permission for the K9 to spend extended time in the patient's room. The girl would light up whenever Rex appeared, and her healing progressed noticeably faster during periods when the dog was present. Detective Rodriguez made a significant discovery during this time. While reviewing surveillance footage from a wider area around where the girl was found, she spotted a van that had been parked several blocks away on the night of the discovery. The vehicle appeared in multiple camera feeds throughout the evening, suggesting it had been circling the area for hours before disappearing just before Daniel found the girl. The license plate was partially obscured, but enhancement technology revealed enough numbers to trace the van to a rental company. The detective's investigation revealed that the van had been rented using false identification, but security cameras at the rental location provided clear images of the person who had rented it. The man appeared to be in his 40s, well-dressed, and drove away in an expensive sedan that was registered to a company, with ties to several ongoing investigations. This discovery confirmed Detective Rodriguez's suspicion that the girl's situation involved organized criminal activity, the deliberate damage to her fingerprints, the amnesia that might have been chemically induced, and now the evidence of surveillance suggested that she had been targeted by people with significant resources and experience. In covering their tracks, the detective shared this information with Daniel and Mrs. Williams, emphasizing the need for increased security around the girl. Hospital administration agreed to implement additional safety measures, including limiting access to her floor and requiring special identification for anyone wanting to visit her room. Despite these precautions, everyone involved in her care noticed that the girl seemed to sense the danger surrounding her situation, even during her happiest moments with Rex. There was an underlying tension in her behavior, as if some part of her mind remembered threats that her conscious memory couldn't access. As the girl's physical recovery progressed and her trust in her caregivers deepened, fragments of memory began to surface. They came not as clear recollections but as emotional responses to specific triggers. Certain smells would cause her to become anxious. Loud voices made her freeze with terror. The sound of high heels clicking on the hospital floor sent her into panic attacks that took hours to resolve. Dr. Chen consulted with specialists in trauma recovery, learning that the girl's amnesia might be partially psychological, her mind protecting itself from memories too painful to process. The presence of Rex seemed to provide the security she needed to begin facing these buried experiences, though the process would clearly take considerable time and careful support. 3 weeks after the girl's awakening, a breakthrough occurred that changed everything. Daniel was sitting with her and Rex during one of their daily visits when she suddenly grabbed his arm with surprising strength. Her eyes were wide with fear, but for the first time, she was trying urgently to communicate something specific rather than simply responding to immediate comfort needs. "Bad men," she whispered, her voice trembling. They took others." The words came out haltingly, as if she was fighting against some internal barrier to speak them. Rex immediately moved closer to her, sensing her distress, and she buried her face in his fur while continuing to speak in fragments. Daniel carefully called for Mrs. Williams and Detective Rodriguez without leaving the girl's side. As the social worker and detective arrived, the girl continued to share pieces of memory that seemed to surface like debris from a shipwreck. She remembered being in a place with other young women, all of them frightened and controlled by men who threatened them constantly. Detective Rodriguez recognized the signs immediately. The girl's fragmented memories, combined with the evidence of deliberately damaged fingerprints and the sophisticated operation that had attempted to eliminate her, pointed to human trafficking. She was likely a victim who had somehow escaped or been abandoned by her captors, possibly because they believed she was dead or too badly injured to survive. The revelation that there were other victims transformed the investigation from a single assault case into a major criminal operation. Detective Rodriguez contacted federal authorities, as human trafficking cases typically involved interstate or international networks. FBI agent Sarah Morrison arrived in Millbrook within 24 hours to coordinate with local law enforcement. Agent Morrison brought resources that the local police department couldn't provide, including access to national databases of missing persons and specialized techniques for working with trafficking victims. She also brought sobering news about the scope of the problem they were facing. The organization responsible for trafficking the girl was likely part of a larger network that operated across multiple states. During this time, the girl's recovery took on new dimensions. As her memories slowly returned, so did her sense of purpose. She began to understand that her survival might be the key to saving other women who were still trapped. This realization seemed to strengthen her resolve, though it also increased her anxiety about potential retaliation from her former captors. Rex continued to play a crucial role in her healing process. The dog seemed to understand when she was struggling with difficult memories, positioning himself beside her bed and providing the physical comfort she needed to continue sharing information with investigators. Hospital staff marveled at the bond between the traumatized young woman and the police dog, noting that Rex appeared to anticipate her emotional needs better than trained therapy animals. Dr. Chen documented the remarkable healing progress, noting that the girl's recovery was proceeding much faster than typically expected for someone with her level of trauma. She attributed this acceleration partly to the consistent presence of Rex and the security provided by Daniel's regular visits. The girl had begun to see them as protectors rather than threats, allowing her mind to relax enough for natural healing to occur. The girl chose the name Hope for herself when Mrs. Williams explained that she needed something to be called, while her real identity remained unknown. The choice seemed symbolic of her determination to survive and help others, despite the horrors she had endured. Everyone involved in her care began using this name, understanding that it represented her reclaiming of personal agency. Agent Morrison worked closely with Hope to piece together information about the trafficking operation. Through careful questioning and the use of psychological techniques designed to help trauma victims access buried memories, they learned about a warehouse facility where multiple women were held, forced to work in various illegal activities, and threatened with violence if they attempted to escape. Hope remembered specific details about the location, the sound of trains passing nearby, the smell of a chemical plant, and the view of a water tower with distinctive markings. These clues helped investigators narrow down potential locations within a 50-mile radius of where she had been found. Aerial surveillance and database searches identified 3 possible sites that matched her descriptions. The investigation revealed that Hope had likely been held captive for several months before her escape. Her damaged fingerprints and the sophisticated nature of the operation suggested that her captors were professionals who had experience in avoiding law enforcement. The fact that she had survived and retained enough memory to provide useful information was remarkable, as most victims in similar situations were either killed or so psychologically damaged that they couldn't assist in investigations. As Hope's strength increased and her memories became clearer, she expressed a desire to help law enforcement rescue the other women she remembered. Agent Morrison explained the risks involved, emphasizing that Hope's safety had to remain the top priority. However, Hope's determination was unwavering. She insisted that she couldn't live with herself if she didn't try to help others who were still suffering. Daniel found himself in an unexpected position as Hope's unofficial guardian and advocate. His initial discovery of her in the alley had evolved into a deep sense of responsibility for her welfare. Rex's extraordinary connection to Hope had created a bond that extended to Daniel as well, making him more invested in her recovery than his professional duties required. The local community had also become invested in Hope's story. Though details were kept confidential to protect her safety, Hospital staff, law enforcement officers, and even local business owners who had heard about the case began contributing to her care in various ways. Donations of clothing, books, and comfort items arrived regularly, creating a support network that Hope had never experienced before. Dr. Chen noted that this community support was having a measurable impact on Hope's recovery. The knowledge that so many people cared about her welfare seemed to counteract some of the psychological damage caused by her traumatic experiences. For the first time in months, Hope was experiencing genuine human kindness without any expectation of return. As preparations began for a coordinated law enforcement operation to investigate the locations Hope had identified, the young woman insisted on being involved despite the obvious dangers. Her detailed knowledge of the facility's layout, security measures, and daily routines could be crucial for ensuring a successful rescue operation while minimizing risk to other victims. The rescue operation took place 6 weeks after Hope's discovery in the alley. Using her detailed descriptions and months of careful planning, federal agents coordinated simultaneous raids on 3 facilities suspected of being part of the trafficking network. Hope provided crucial intelligence from a secure location, communicating with tactical teams through Agent Morrison while Rex stayed close by her side, providing emotional support during the intense operation. The main warehouse Hope had described was located exactly where her memories had suggested, near an active railroad line and within sight of the distinctively marked water tower. When federal agents breached the facility, they found 12 young women being held against their will, living in conditions that shocked even experienced law enforcement officers. The women ranged in age from 16 to 25, and all showed signs of physical and psychological abuse similar to what Hope had endured. The rescue was successful beyond investigators' expectations. In addition to freeing the trapped women, agents arrested 7 members of the trafficking organization, including the man who had rented the van spotted near where Hope was found. Computer equipment seized during the raids contained evidence of a much larger criminal network, operating across multiple states and involving dozens of additional victims. Hope's courage in sharing her memories had directly led to saving 12 lives and dismantling a significant portion of a trafficking operation that had been operating for over 3 years. Agent Morrison later told her that without her detailed information, law enforcement might never have located the facility or understood the scope of the criminal enterprise involved. The rescued women were taken to specialized facilities where they could receive medical care and psychological support, similar to what Hope had experienced. Many of them were from other states or even other countries, and the process of reuniting them with families or providing them with new identities and safe housing would take months. Hope volunteered to speak with several of them, sharing her own recovery story and offering hope that healing was possible. Dr. Chen documented Hope's remarkable transformation from unconscious victim to empowered survivor, who had helped save others. The young woman's physical recovery was nearly complete, but more importantly, her psychological healing had progressed to the point where she could function independently and had regained a sense of purpose and self-worth. Daniel and Rex continued to visit Hope regularly, even after she was discharged from the hospital and moved to a safe house while federal investigators completed their work. The bond between the 3 of them had become something unique and permanent. Hope often said that Rex had saved her life not just by leading Daniel to find her, but by showing her that trust and love were still possible after experiencing such trauma. The local community's response to Hope's story amazed everyone involved. When news of the successful rescue operation became public, though Hope's identity remained protected, donations poured in to support her recovery and the recovery of the other rescued women. A scholarship fund was established in her honor to help trafficking survivors pursue education and rebuild their lives. Hope decided to use the name permanently, legally changing her identity with the help of federal victim services. Her original identity remained a mystery, as her fingerprints had been too damaged to match existing records and no missing person reports had ever been filed that matched her description. This suggested that she had been targeted and taken before anyone realized she was missing, or that she had been estranged from family who might have reported her disappearance. Rather than dwelling on the lost past, Hope chose to focus on building a future. She enrolled in community college with the goal of studying social work, hoping to eventually help other trafficking survivors. Her experiences had given her unique insights into the recovery process and the importance of having advocates who truly understood what victims had endured. Daniel received commendation from the police department and federal authorities for his role in the case, but he consistently emphasized that Rex deserved most of the credit for the initial discovery. The K-9's extraordinary behavior that night in the alley had started a chain of events that ultimately saved 13 lives and brought dangerous criminals to justice. Rex seemed to understand the significance of his actions. During visits with Hope, the dog displayed a calm satisfaction that his handlers had never seen before. It was as if he knew that his work had made a real difference in the world, beyond the typical law enforcement duties he performed daily. The case became a training example used by federal agencies to demonstrate the importance of following up on seemingly routine discoveries and the value of building trust with trauma victims. Hope's recovery story was shared at conferences and training sessions, inspiring law enforcement officers and social workers to approach similar cases with patience and creativity. 6 months after her rescue, Hope testified via video link in the federal trial of her captors, helping to secure convictions that resulted in lengthy prison sentences for all 7 defendants. Her testimony was powerful not just because of the facts she presented, but because of the strength and dignity she displayed while recounting her experiences. Hope maintained contact with several of the women who had been rescued based on her information. They formed an informal support network, understanding each other's experiences in ways that even trained counselors couldn't fully comprehend. Together, they worked with federal agencies to identify other potential trafficking operations and support newly rescued victims. The story of the unconscious girl found in an alley by a cop and his K-9 partner became legendary within law enforcement circles, but for those directly involved, it represented something more profound. It demonstrated that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when people are simply doing their jobs with dedication and compassion, and that healing from even the worst trauma is possible when survivors receive the support and protection they deserve. Hope eventually moved to a new city to start fresh, but she remained in contact with Daniel and made special arrangements to visit Rex regularly. The 3 of them had been brought together by tragedy, but their connection had created something beautiful and lasting. Hope often said that Rex had taught her that heroism comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most powerful healing happens through simple acts of loyalty, presence, and unconditional love.